Well, I'm glad to be here with Michael O'Donnell, who is a buddy of mine. We've served in the legislature together. He has been a bond trader for over 30 years, and his career track changed significantly when he was in New York on 9/11 in 2001. That forever changed the trajectory of his life. That led him to enlisting to the U.S. Navy at the age of 36 and going on to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan. And due to this being a podcast dropped on 9/11, it just felt like this was an important way to honor that date, what it means to our country 22 years later. Where are we? Were people that were in the middle of that situation? What were they experiencing? So, Michael, glad to have you, man. Thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell me about your experience on 9/11. Let's just jump right into that. Tell me where you were that day, what was going on, what you experienced.
Yeah, so my firm, we had, like you said before, I'm a bond trader, and we had put out a new platform for our sales force to use to search our bond inventory, and they had identified a group of us traders and analysts to go out and talk to the branches and explain the new system. And so that entire week, actually, I had 3 different weeks where I was going to New York, Philly, and Phoenix over the course of the next couple of months. And so New York was scheduled for the second week of September, and that week before, because there were so many folks that I traded with, so many dealer contacts I traded with, I had a sheet of all the people that I was meeting with later in the day. My daytime was spent in our branches, and then at night I was scheduled to meet with all of these folks that I traded with. I was jokingly say that the bond trading business is sleeping with your enemy. I spend all day on the phone and now instant messaging with friends from other firms that are out there trying to do the same thing that I am. And so my plan for that Tuesday, September 11th, was to be out on Long Island. I was going to be in one of our branches in the morning, and then visit another branch quickly, and then jump on the train and head down to the World Trade Center. And then the plan was to spend an hour or two on the trading desk at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 104th floor of Tower 1, where my friend Carl Smith worked. And Carl and I had been trading. Carl was a broker's broker, so he put himself in between. He was kind of a middleman between dealers, so he might actually facilitate trades between me. I was at A.G. Edwards at the time, and UBS or Fidelity or someone like that. And so Carl was one of these middle guys, and I had gotten to know Carl really well, and when he was at a different firm, and he moved over to Cantor Fitzgerald, and reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you mind if I covered you?" I didn't have anybody covering me from there. It was great. I was talking to Carl, several times a day. We would chit chat about everything from, what our kids were doing, or, vacations and all that stuff. You become friends with these folks. And so Carl and I had traded for about 8 years, and I called him, a couple of weeks before and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. I'm going to be in New York. Would you have some time on Tuesday?" And he's like, "Yeah, come on up. You can come up. We're on the 104th floor. Security's kind of a pain, because some of you may remember there was an attack on the Trade Center before, done in one of the garages, and the security had been beefed up." And so his solution was that you go up to 107, where Windows on the World, the restaurant, was, and then I was going to call him from there, and he'd run up the stairs and bring me down, and we would just hang out on the desk for a couple of hours, and then the plan was to go to dinner. And so I touched base with everybody I was meeting with that week before. I talked to Carl on Friday. Was really looking forward to getting together with him. Carl was a hoot. He was a lot of fun. He did some great impersonations of some of the folks that we traded with. Just a really good guy. And so that Tuesday, the other gentleman that I was traveling with, we headed out to Long Island and went to one of the branches, and we were getting set up with our demonstration, and someone yelled from their office, "Hey, a plane just hit the World Trade Center." And so we went into this gentleman's office, and we looked, and from what we could see, it looked like a Cessna had hit the tower. And my first thought was, "Oh, they're going to have to evacuate Carl's building." I should give him a call and just tell him, don't wait around for me. I'll be around later this week. We'll get together some other time. And so I called the number and got a really strange busy signal and thought, well, I guess a lot of folks are probably trying to get in to talk to their loved ones to make sure they're okay. I'll leave them alone. I didn't really think much of it until the next plane hit. And, that at that point, a lot of us figured out something was really different. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a Cessna that had gone off track. This was something very different. But for me, that instant, that second plane hit, what was going through my head was, oh my gosh, I knew people in that building as well. And so I'm, going through my head, just kind of ticking off the people that I knew in each of those buildings and wondering, what were they, what were they enduring? What was going on? Were they safe? I had friends in buildings nearby. And then 30 minutes after that second plane hit, or 45 minutes after that second plane hit, that second tower came down, and I thought for sure I lost, several friends at that point. But I'll say this, and I've said this before when I've told my 9/11 story to other folks. Of all days, I've probably never said the expression "thank God" as many as I did on that day. As terrible as all that was, as the day wore on and as we lost the second building, I started to get reports of folks that were kind of reporting in, and I was relieved to hear, oh, we just heard from Jimmy Slater at this shop, and we just heard from Jeff Dennehy here, and oh, I just talked to Michael Sullivan, and he's with so and so down at Penn Station, and they're okay. But the problem was that we still weren't hearing from Carl, and just that whole that whole day wore on, and just the disbelief of what was going on was pretty crazy. That from where I was out on Long Island, although I was probably 20 miles away, you could see the smoke from the buildings throughout the entire episode, and really into the rest of the week. We ended up staying until that Thursday, but you could see the smoke coming from that area, from the Trade Center area, the entire week.
That's wild. Yeah. So what happened with Carl? What'd you find out about him? And obviously he passed. So what tell me about that.
Yeah. So as things sort of wore on and people started to check in, and I connected with my friend Michael Sullivan, and we got together and met at a restaurant out on Long Island near where he lived, and we just hung out, just kind of talking through the day and talking through everything that had gone on. And actually, what's interesting is he and I now we talk every day on 9/11. He's since retired from the business, but every 9/11. I always call him. Even when I was in Iraq on 9/11, I gave him a call, and we just kind of talked through the days and the memories. But the next day, that Wednesday, we still trudged on and went to our next branch, and we were just getting set up. And it was odd to me. Somebody came into the conference room and said, "Is someone in here Michael O'Donnell? Are you from the home office?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And he said, "You've got a call on line 2. I'm like, "Oh, who knows I'm here besides my friends at work." And I jumped on a call, and it was my friend Michael Green, and he was calling to check on me. He knew that I was supposed to be with Carl that day, and knew that I was going to the Trade Center. He just wasn't sure when that was, and so he called to see where I was and to see if I had heard anything from Carl, and we hadn't. And we continue to watch things unravel on TV. And you see people putting up signs and things like that. We really didn't hear anything about Carl until several weeks later, when his wedding ring was retrieved at the site of the World Trade Center. So as they sort of sifted through the debris looking for things, one of the things they came across was Carl's ring. So that's how we knew that he was there. There was really no chance for those folks that were in Tower 1 that were above the crash. The people that were in Tower 2, my initial concerns, my initial worries were those people were still there. There was no way they got out in 45 minutes. Well, it turns out the gentleman, that name that I mentioned earlier, Jimmy Slater, he stayed back, and I think he was at Morgan Stanley at the time. He stayed back as part of the skeleton crew. There wasn't a whole lot of trading going on. People were just kind of glued to the TV. Nobody was thinking about anything finance wise. And so he had apparently was on the phone with someone at my trading desk in St. Louis, and they were talking, and he had kind of come to the conclusion that was pretty much it. There wasn't much going to happen, so he was going to head out as well. And the story goes, he hung up with the guy on my trading desk and walked over to take one last look at the tower burning, when Tower 1 burning, when the second plane hit his tower. And he said he thought it was going to completely knock their building over. It moved so much when that plane hit. And so he obviously did the right thing and started heading down the stairs. And it took him 30 minutes to get down the stairs. And he was about 15 minutes away from Tower 2 when it came down. But just the fact that people evacuated the second tower, probably saved thousands of lives that day. That was just the absolute right decision. And we're fortunate that we didn't lose more people that day.
The whole situation is just wild. Watching it from afar, I was I think a sophomore in college. Watching it, I was glued to the TV for weeks. It just became the event of my lifetime. At that point, being a 21-year-old, 20-year-old kid, watching this live on TV, not knowing what's going on, having a president, step up in a way that seemed, at the time we just didn't know anything, and so we were all freaked out. Right. What are we doing? What war are we going into? What's going to happen? I think for a lot of us men, it really created in us a desire to serve in some capacity. I mean, I remember very specifically thinking, I need to go into the military. My country needs me. We need to step up. I didn't, because it just wasn't where the Lord had me at the time. But I don't think I had a lot of friends that didn't think that way. And you thought the same way. And that kind of created this catalyst for you to go into the military. And so tell me a little bit about that. And unless you have more about the situation that's worth knowing about.
I would say, just the whole, you talk about, how it was all unfolding and everything to have been there. For me, that Wednesday, when we were done on Wednesday, we pushed up our Thursday appointment, canceled our Friday appointment. And all I wanted to do at that point was to get home. My daughter's birthday was on that Saturday, and I just wanted to be home for her birthday party. She was going to be 3. I had a son that was just turning 1 a little later, and so just to get home to them was all I wanted. And it wasn't easy. You would think, yep, just jump on a plane and head home, and that wasn't. You think back to what was going on at the time. That wasn't going to happen. The good news was for us, we actually had a rental car, and so we kept it. The rental car companies were very helpful in allowing people to hang onto their cars, not charging them one-way charges for returning a car somewhere else. And so that Thursday, the guy I was with, his brother was actually flying into New York, lived in New York, and was flying into New York when the whole thing went down. And so he got diverted to Canada. And so he, all my friend wanted to do was just kind of to see his brother. His brother had finally made it to New York. And I said, okay, here's the plan. You go downtown and you hook up with your brother, and I'm going to get the car off of Long Island over into New Jersey, and I'll pick you up at the train station over in New Jersey, and we'll head out from there. And so we did that. And just, I remember going across the Verrazano Narrows Bridge and looking downtown and just seeing the entire New York skyline dark because the power was out down there, and the only light was the lights of the folks working, trying to recover, try to save lives, hoping that there were people still alive in the wreckage. And I'll never forget just seeing that. It's just so eerie to see New York without not at least one light on. And typically you see just thousands of lights coming from there, and to see, but one, and that it being those lights coming from the ground. But eventually I get over, and I pick him up, and we jump in the car, and we start heading west on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And he said, let me know when you get tired. I'll take over. And so I drove, and we drove for quite a long time. And it was about 1:30 in the morning. And I said, hey, I'm getting tired. Would you want to drive? He's like, I don't think I'm going to be able to. Let's just find a place to stop, and we'll turn in for the night and get an early start in the morning. And so we looked, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, there's not a lot of exits on the Turnpike. And so we look and see, and it says, next exit, Somerset, 20 miles. And I'm like, I've heard Somerset. Why is that familiar? And, as we started approaching, we're like, oh, that's where the fourth plane went down. That's where the fourth plane went down. And so we get off there and tried several hotels, but we knew just by the parking lots that they were completely filled with media. And so we had to drive about another 40 miles to get far enough away from that. We just couldn't get away from the whole experience. And so, eventually we got to a place where we could sleep for the night. We got about 5 or 6 hours of sleep, and we jumped in the car and finished our way, back to St. Louis. And I got in late. Go ahead.
Was your wife freaking out? Does she freak out?
She wasn't, and so that's actually kind of funny, because while I was out on Long Island, and you're just kind of sitting there watching things unfold, the guy that I was traveling with, we both kind of came to the same conclusion. We haven't talked to anybody. We haven't talked to the trading desk. We haven't talked to anybody. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't called my wife. And so I called her and said, hey, I just want to let you know I'm okay. She goes, yeah, I figured you were fine. I knew you weren't going down to the trade center till later in the day. I was like, oh, okay. She says, but you better call your mom. She goes, she's not happy. I'm like, okay. So I got on the phone and called my mother and let her know that I was okay. And, I did touch in with the trading desk just so that they knew that we were in a good place. So there was so much going on. You don't think about what other people are going through, but it's it was quite the experience.
How did that catalyze your desire to be in the Navy?
So
what'd that look like?
I came home from that. I came home from that, and it didn't hit me right away. It wasn't like, I'm on my way home thinking I got to do something, I'm mad or whatever. It didn't hit me right away. I came home, I got home about midnight. The next morning, the kids came into my bedroom. I was, asleep because we got in late. And, I was out on Long Island, out on Montauk, which is at the eastern tip of Long Island, with my friend Michael Green. And while I was out there, my kids loved for us to read to them. And so I saw this book about lighthouses and bought this book. And I said, oh, I've got something for you guys. Let me get it. And so I grabbed this book, and we laid there on the bed, and I started reading it to them, and I couldn't get through it. It suddenly hit me that Carl was never going to do that with his kids again. And that was kind of the beginning of it. My wife finished reading the book and then kind of took the kids out of the room, and I closed the door and really broke down. It finally hit me. I think while you're in it, you're in shock. You're dealing with what's in front of you. You're trying to fix the problem. As a kid, I was a hothead, but I quickly realized that letting emotions get the best of you, doesn't help fix the problem. And so, while I was in the midst of what was going on in New York and trying to get home, I focused on that. I didn't allow myself the emotions. And once I got home and was in a safe place, the emotions just kind of overwhelmed me. And so that was kind of the beginning of this feeling that, there's something bigger going on, but I still hadn't put two and two together. So this was obviously September. It was about a year later. A friend of mine was running for state representative, and I was out helping him. He was a guy named Jim Avery, and I overheard him talking to a gentleman who had a hat on that said he was a World War II veteran. And I overheard him say, "Oh yeah, I'm part of this Missouri National Guard program. To essentially, I'm going to be a commissioned officer and do all of these things. And I was like, what are you talking about? We're too old for this. You can't do this. And I was what, 33 when 9/11 happened. And suddenly that's when the light started to go on. I suddenly realized there is something I can do. I was watching, what was going on TV and felt helpless to do anything. And so that was kind of the trigger for me. And I came home from that, jumped on the internet and started looking. Kind of set the National Guard thing aside. But I wanted to do something, and I wanted to do something that was going to be at the tip of the spear, and started looking, looking at Army, looking at Marine Corps, and I ran across this program that the Navy had. It was a direct commissioned officer program, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to get into intelligence. They're going to need tons of intelligence folks, going forward. This is what I'm going to do. And so I started down this path of reached out to a recruiter and, put in an application, went through a physical, did all of these things, cleared some hurdles. There were some things that didn't, that kind of slowed the process down, but finally got the whole package together and submitted it. And the recruiter said, yeah, you're a great candidate. You bring great experience. I had great interviews with some intelligence officers, and they kind of made the connection between what I was doing in finance, as a bond trader. All day long I'm getting fed information. I'm trying to verify some of it, trying to discount some of it, setting some of it aside is invaluable. And then throughout the day, I take that information, and someone called, I would take that kind of information that was in my head and use the next 7 to 10 seconds to process whether I was going to, buy 1 million bonds or not. And they were like, you're doing exactly what we do. You're a perfect fit. And I thought, okay, that's great. Let's do this. And so I send my package in, and we wait for 6 or 8 weeks for this board to meet. And there's my letter. I get my letter and I open it up. We thank you for your submission and your interest in the Direct Commission Officer Program, but we regret to inform you that you have not been selected. We encourage you to apply again. And I thought, wow, okay, this must not be the path. This must, God must have something else in mind for me. And I thought, well, that's it. The military isn't his path for me. I've got to figure out what else it is. But it just wouldn't go away at that point. It just kept coming. And now, then we get to the point where we're in the middle of 2 wars, and I'm watching this on TV, and I kept saying to myself, I think I'm supposed to be there. What am I missing? And so I went back to researching, and I thought, well, maybe I'll enlist. And so I started looking at some of the Navy programs with enlisted intelligence, and found a program where I could actually go in at an advanced pay grade. So I went in as an E4, a petty officer 3rd class. And again, went through the whole process, and finally, I think it was, March of 2005, I got accepted, and I raised my hand and swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So, and then at that point I was 36 years old, but I had like big plans. I mean, I was gonna, I wanted to get into the fight. I wanted to go to Iraq or Afghanistan, and so I started down that path.
And you did. You went to Iraq and Afghanistan. Just like really quickly, can you tell us about those experiences?
Sure. Yeah. So there was a training pipeline. They don't just, raise your right hand and put you on a boat or put you on a plane and send you away. There's a lot of training that goes into doing a job in the military. And so, I went through that process, several months. And while I was going through that process, I was asked, you need to pick a specialty. So within the intelligence community, you had to pick a specialty. You had to look at imagery or just operational intelligence. But the one I saw that I wanted was in the slang for it was ground, but it was working with any naval ground forces. It was Navy SEALs, Seabees, Riveron, expeditionary warfare, military civil affairs. Those were the folks that I wanted to work with, and so I put in for to go to that school. And ultimately, long story short, there's a kind of a winding path there too, but ended up getting selected to go to that school, and ended up going downrange to work. First, initially worked with the Seabees, trying to keep them safe. Went to Iraq in 2008. That was during what we called the Anbar Awakening, which the Anbar province is in western Iraq, and the Al Qaeda had really inserted a stronghold there, but it had gotten to the point where the locals had initially accepted the Al Qaeda presence, but that eventually turned because they had just gotten to be so brutal on the locals that when the U.S. reached out to them and said, "Hey, what can we do to get you on our side?" They quickly did, and so we arrived during the surge in 2008 to help increase the forces there. So we were there in support of the First Marine Expeditionary Force, which was headed by, and this name might ring a bell to you, but was headed by General John Kelly, who ultimately ended up becoming the chief of staff for President Trump. But he was an amazing man to watch, just watching him during his briefing and seeing the questions he would ask and thinking, wow, why didn't I think of that? This guy's so smart. He's just asking all of these incredible questions. But yeah, we were there I was in Iraq for about 4 months in Western Anbar, trying to keep the Seabees safe as they were kind of going around the area. Spent some time in the Al Assad Air Base, and then also spent some time at Ramadi as well, just doing that, just kind of working to keep the Seabees safe as they were out. And then we got word there was kind of something bit of a rumble in towards the third or fourth month, and a lot of folks were getting excited because they thought we were going home, because we had really made some inroads with the Iraqis in Western Iraq. And it turned out we weren't going home. We were actually picking up the command and moving it to Afghanistan. So we ended up going to Kandahar, Afghanistan, to establish a foothold there. And what ended up happening for the Seabees, they weren't really doing much. They were just kind of building this headquarter facility, and so they weren't going outside the wire, and they really didn't need us intel folks that much. And so what my boss did was he kind of farmed a couple of us out. Those of us that had that ground intel background, we were in high demand. And so when he showed up, he reached out to the Kandahar Intelligence Fusion Center. The CEO there was a Navy commander, and he said, "Hey, I've got these two ground analysts, and they're not going to be doing anything. Could you use them?" And he's like, "Wow, how'd you get those? I'd love to have those guys. Send them over." So the one guy ended up working with the Canadians, and I got to work with the Brits doing counter narcotics in the Helmand province. So the Seabees laughed at us because we were doing work, right? We were doing our thing, and they were kind of on easy duty. They weren't doing a whole lot, but it was without a doubt the best experience I had, just working with. We were in a skiff, an intelligence cell that had Brits, Australians, Canadians, U.S. and Dutch, and it was just a really great environment to work. I mean, we always like to say, our military is our best and brightest. It's no different for those other nations as well. Just some super bright people, and just, in fact, probably the best boss I ever had was the British Army captain that I reported to. She was amazing. She's just so smart and just a really great leader. Just as much of that experience might sound, not that great to be out in the desert, it was just absolutely amazing.
I can only imagine that experience. And I want to switch gears a little bit because we only have a few more minutes here. But what do you think now? And maybe we include this, maybe we don't. I don't know. But I'd love your opinion, because I think a lot of people have an opinion on Iraq and Afghanistan now, 20 some years later after 9/11. You put your life on the line. Many of your brothers and sisters in arms put their life on the line. And there's a lot of opinions about the fact that we went to Iraq and Afghanistan back then. What are your opinions about, looking back, the decision-making process from our political leaders and whether or not we should have been there?
The problem is that hindsight is 20/20. You go to war with the intelligence you have, and it looked like, and it made sense. I mean, we had seen, let's take Iraq first. what we had seen from Saddam Hussein all along was that he was actively pursuing weapons of mass destruction, and had multiple times, done strikes between the end of the first Gulf War and 9/11. We had done multiple attacks to try to degrade that. So it wasn't a leap for us to think, oh, he's probably still trying to do that. The thing that we missed, and we in Intel, I'll go ahead and confess it, we missed stuff. And the thing we missed was that they just didn't have the ability to continue that program, that we had degraded it so much that they just didn't have any way of continuing it. But what was happening was, and I always jokingly refer to this as the Saddam Hussein school of leadership. Saddam had scared his generals to the degree that if they told him anything but, yes, we've got this robust, chemical weapons program, this robust biological program, and a nuclear program, they would have cut Saddam would have cut their heads off. So what do you tell them? You tell them whatever, keeps you alive another day. And so everything we had, every indication we had, was communications between his top officials about how these programs were going, communications to Saddam about how these things were going. We had every reason to suspect that. There wasn't a connection, but I don't know that the connection was the connection wasn't necessarily needed, and it wasn't clear that there was a connection with Al Qaeda. But I mean, him not continuing those programs was part of the original, truce of, or the initial truce from the first Gulf War. So the fact that if he actually had these things, it was cause for war. It was cause for us to go in there. So, in hindsight, we missed it. We missed that, but, every indication that we had suggested that we had a problem, and we probably needed to deal with it.
It's really interesting because we spent so much money there, and the outcome even now looks so, I don't know what a good word for it is, so muddy as far as the result of the amount of investment we put into Iraq, Afghanistan, even more so. I mean, we had just a couple years ago, we pulled out of there, and I haven't seen that died there coming out of it. So it's
the two theaters were very different because we kept using the word rebuild, but we used it for both of them. We didn't destroy Iraq to the degree that that it was severe. It was already kind of in a degrading state. Their utility grid was not in good shape. We were helping them to really build something that was already in the stages of decline. But to use the word rebuild in Afghanistan was absolutely a misnomer. There was nothing there. There was no about it. It was building. They had one road that the ring road, we called it, that was a loop around the country. That was the extent of their road, their transportation infrastructure. So we were there, essentially trying to create the infrastructure just so the U.S. military could move. And so, we spent tons of money, and unfortunately, we lost a lot of lives. As far as Afghanistan goes, we got, to the end that we wanted, right? Eventually we got Saddam, we got Osama bin Laden. It took us a long time, but, we did it. And we sent a message, this is what you should expect. I think, the sleeping giant, became real for the Middle East. They thought that they'd really beat America, and all they did was really wake a sleeping giant. And it cost a lot of lives. It cost a lot of lives of folks in the Middle East. It cost a lot of American lives. It cost a lot of American treasure. But you can't do that to the United States. That's not how we operate. You and I know in the legislature, you never use a nuclear option. You always have a conversation, and I think that's the takeaway. Don't use the nuclear option.
The problem is nowadays, especially in politics, is people are much more willing to use the nuclear option, and not, that's just an analogy. It's not
an expression.
an expression. It's not an actual thing that happens in politics. I think it overstates it a little bit, but people are unwilling to do the hard work it requires to come to conclusions in politics that isn't just lazy, which is name calling and division and derision.
Right.
But that's a conversation for a whole nother day. Well, Michael, thanks, man, for joining me. This has been a really great conversation to hear your experience on 9/11. And
my pleasure, Travis.
It's always been fun to serve with you, too. You're a great guy.
Likewise. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure to work with you.